Greetings. You are here because you feel an itch. It is an instinctive desire to put your achievements on display, to bask in the rays of someone else's envy or recognition. You call it sharing success. I call it a voluntary surrender of your positions. In the social hierarchy, boasting is a signal that your resource exceeds your ability to protect it. You open the safe to show the gold, forgetting that the room is full of hungry eyes. You are not the hunter. You are the prey that is signaling its location. We begin the dissection. I will show you how your own tongue weaves a noose around your neck. Chapter 1. The Effect of Imaginary Security. The Golden Peacock, Trap 1. The Clash Phase. A restaurant in central London. 3 people are at the table: Julian, Mark, and Sarah. The air is saturated with the scent of expensive perfume and the faint aroma of ozone before a storm. Julian has just closed a major deal. His face is glowing. His pupils are dilated from a dopamine surge. He is not just speaking, he is orating. "It was too easy," Julian says, casually pushing away the plate with the unfinished tartare. He wants to appear sated, but his fingers are gripping the wine glass too tightly. "The investors from Edinburgh tried to push, but I set such conditions for them that they signed everything in 10 minutes. £5 million of net profit in the first quarter. You know, at that moment, I finally felt that I control this city." Mark listens, tilting his head slightly to the right. This is a posture of feigned agreement. His lips are stretched into a thin smile, but the corners of his eyes do not move. This is false joy, a mask. "Amazing, Julian," Mark says softly. In his head, the counters are already clicking. 5 million, Edinburgh. The deal closed today. This means the logistics have not been restructured yet. "You must have used that offshore transit scheme you mentioned last month?" Julian takes a sip, his vigilance dulled by flattery. "Exactly. And to be honest, the security system there is just a formality. I found a loophole that saves us 15% on taxes." The silence at the table becomes tangible. Sarah looks out the window, but her hearing is sharpened to the limit. Julian feels like a king, not noticing how Mark is inconspicuously typing keywords into his smartphone memory under the table. 2. The Psychological X-ray Phase. What happened? Julian became a victim of the cognitive bias of self-aggrandizement. At this moment, his prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational planning and security, is suppressed by the limbic system, which is flooded with dopamine. Dopamine blindness. Boasting causes the same neurochemical response as a real achievement. The brain receives the reward in advance and relaxes. Information leakage. Mark applied the soft extraction method. A boaster always gives away critical details, working methods, vulnerabilities, amounts, because details make his story weightier in the eyes of others. Social triangulation. Julian believes he is strengthening his status. In reality, he is provoking an evolutionary envy response in Mark and Sarah. In ethology, an individual demonstrating an excess of resource without an obvious necessity becomes a target for the entire pack. 3. The Psychological Precedent Phase. Recall the Robbers Cave experiment. Social psychologist Muzaffar Sharif proved that as soon as one group of boys in a camp began to demonstrate their superiority or exclusive access to resources, the second group immediately switched to a mode of hostility and sabotage. Julian's boasting is the creation of an artificial division between the haver and the observers. Mark's and Sarah's brains automatically classify Julian as a threat to their own status. At this moment, the social contract is terminated. Now they are predators looking for a gap in his armor. 4. The counter-strike phase. If Julian possessed strategic thinking, he would have understood. Your victory is a reason for doubling vigilance, not for removing the mask. Lesson number 1. The principle of information fasting. Those around you should know about your results only what they see with their own eyes, and never how you achieve them. Your assets must be invisible until they become an indisputable fact of power. Boasting is a sign that you yourself do not yet believe in your strength and are seeking confirmation from the outside. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The napkin on Julian's lap is crumpled. The metal of the fork feels ice cold in Mark's hand. The light from the lamps reflects in the polished surface of the table, creating an illusion of bottomless black water. Julian continues to speak, but his voice is drowning in the noise of the air conditioners, turning into white noise. A background against which the experienced player, Mark, is already building a game to destroy his competitor. We continue. Your ego demands nourishment, but the price of this dopamine injection is your internal autonomy. When you boast, you hand the remote control of your state into the hands of those around you. You are no longer the master of your value. You are its hostage. Chapter 2. Erosion of self-sufficiency. The external mirror. Rule 1. The clash phase. A penthouse party in a suburb of Los Angeles. The hostess is Chloe, a young artist whose exhibition recently took place with moderate success. Among the guests are Anthony, an influential critic with a cold, evaluating gaze, and Elena, Chloe's longtime rival. Chloe cannot stop. She leads Anthony to her new work. I worked on this canvas for 3 months, she says, her voice trembling slightly with the anticipation of praise. She's looking for a reflection of her genius in his eyes because inside her there is a ringing emptiness. A collector from New York has already offered a 6-figure sum for it. He said it is a new word in neo-expressionism. Anthony slowly adjusts his glasses. He is silent for 5 seconds. 10. The silence sucks in Chloe's confidence like a black hole. 6 figures? He finally says, raising one eyebrow. This is a micro gesture of doubt, a strike at the most vulnerable point. Amusing. Usually such sums are paid for works with a more mature composition. But I suppose there is a shortage in the market right now. Chloe turns pale. Her triumph has just turned to ash. She begins to make excuses, explain the technique of the brushstrokes, and quote philosophers. The more she speaks, the more pathetic she looks. Elena stands a couple of meters away, sipping champagne and watching how Chloe digs her own grave by demonstrating her desperate need for approval. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. The mechanism of the external locus of control worked here. Chloe made a critical mistake. She made her self-esteem a derivative of the reaction of those around her. Cognitive suppression. When we boast, we set a price tag on our achievement. If others refuse to buy at this price through skepticism or ignoring, our brain interprets this as a social defeat. Cortisol instantly replaces dopamine. Status inversion. Chloe thought that boasting would elevate her. In fact, she took a submissive, subordinate position. He who boasts is asking. He who evaluates possesses the power. The devaluation effect. Psychologically, as soon as success is verbalized for the purpose of boasting, it ceases to belong to you. It becomes public property that everyone is free to criticize. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to Leon Festinger's social comparison theory. We evaluate ourselves by comparing ourselves with others. But boasting creates an asymmetric comparison. When you display your success, you make others feel lower. To restore psychological homeostasis, balance, Their brain is obliged to find a way to bring you down. Recall clinical cases of narcissistic expansion. Patients who depend on external attributes of success, cars, checks, connections, fall into deep depression at the slightest criticism of these attributes. Boasting is the creation of a narcissistic bubble that bursts from a single cold look. 4. The counter-strike phase. Your achievements should be your personal fortress, not a decoration for passers-by. Lesson number 2. The principle of absolute silence. True strength does not need witnesses. If you have done something great and it hurts you that no one knows about it, it means you did it not for yourself, but for your vanity. Kill the need for an audience within yourself. The most dangerous person is the one who has achieved success, but behaves as if nothing has happened. It is impossible to hurt him because you do not know where his boundaries are. 5. The sensory immersion phase. It becomes stuffy in the hall. The scent of lilies from the vases seems cloying, almost funereal. Chloe feels a cold drop of sweat rolling down her back under her dress. Anthony has already turned away. His attention has switched to another object, leaving Chloe alone in the spotlight, devastated, disarmed, and completely dependent on his next word, which may never be spoken. We continue the descent into the abyss of your social imprudence. If the first 2 chapters concerned your internal state and perception, the third is pure survival strategy. Boasting is not just noise. It is a radio beacon that you turn on in a sea teeming with sharks. Chapter 3. Architecture of the target. The tax on superiority. Rule 1. The clash phase. An office of a private investment company in Singapore. Panoramic windows reflect the neon lights of the city, turning them into blurred electric spots. At the table are Arthur, an ambitious analyst, and his senior partner, Benedict. Arthur has just received a bonus for the quarter. His check lies on the table like a loaded gun. He cannot help himself. Benedict, I bought that very apartment on the waterfront. In cash, Arthur says, leaning back in his chair. His posture is too relaxed. He is subconsciously dominating, violating the hierarchy. My algorithm performed 40% better than we predicted. I think I have cracked this market. Benedict looks at Arthur through the steam from his tea. His gaze is a cold scalpel. An apartment is good, Arthur. Stability is important. Benedict says slowly. In his head, Arthur has ceased to be a valuable asset and has become a liability. Since you have such surpluses, I suppose you do not mind taking on the operational expenses for the new project in Jakarta. And by the way, your algorithm. We need to transfer it to the General Development Department. Such power should not depend on one person. Arthur freezes. The smile slides off his face. He wanted recognition of his genius, but received additional obligations and the expropriation of his main asset. Benedict is not angry. He is simply shearing the one who raised his head too high. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Arthur encountered the phenomenon of social parasitism and the instinct for leveling, the signal of excess profit. In biology, an excess of resources in one individual attracts the attention of free riders, parasites. By boasting, you inform the world, I have extra. Society immediately finds ways to take this extra through requests for loans, tax increases, or piling on unpaid work. Threat to hierarchy. Benedict is the alpha in this structure. Arthur's statement, I cracked the market, is read as a claim to the throne. The response is to suppress Arthur's resource to return him to the stable. Informational devaluation. By boasting about the algorithm, Arthur deprived it of its mystical aura. Now it is not Arthur's magic, but a company tool that can be taken away. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to evolutionary psychology and the tall poppy syndrome. In social structures, there is an automatic mechanism for cutting off those who stand out excessively. This mechanism is embedded in the limbic system. A group feels safe when resources are distributed predictably. As soon as someone declares a sharp lead through boasting, the rest activate crab mode. The social crab that pulls the one climbing out back into the bucket. This is not morality. It is the biological self-regulation of the system against a potential tyrant. 4. The counterstrike phase. Your strategy must be based on radical pragmatism. Lesson number 3. The principle of false vulnerability. If you are truly successful, your task is to look normal or even slightly problematic. Never show the bottom of your wallet. If you closed a deal for $1 million, complain about the rising price of gasoline or difficulties with logistics. This creates an illusion among others that you are one of them and removes the target from you. Let them pity you while you quietly buy up their assets. 5. The sensory immersion phase. It becomes cold in the office. The air conditioner is working at full capacity, imitating the climate of an Arctic desert. Arthur looks at his check, which a minute ago seemed like a ticket to the major leagues, and now looks like a court summons. Benedict methodically stirs the sugar in his cup, and the sound of metal against porcelain reminds Arthur of the clinking of shackles. The information vacuum that he so foolishly filled with his blustering is now collapsing, crushing his autonomy. We are entering the zone of strategic paralysis. Boasting is not only a data leak. It is a voluntary disclosure of your cards in a game where bluffing is the only way to survive. When you say, "I did this," you fix your position, and a fixed target is a dead target. Chapter 4. Destruction of reality. The information vacuum, Rule 1. The clash phase, a private club in London. Massive oak panels absorb sounds, leaving only the muffled clink of crystal. Oliver, an ambitious startup founder, sits across from James, an old venture capitalist whose eyes resemble frozen mercury. Oliver wants to make an impression. He leans forward, reducing the distance, violating the boundaries of personal space. James, we are not just growing. We are dominating. Oliver whispers with a burning gaze. His pupils are dilated. His breathing is shallow. He is in a state of euphoria. Next month, we are acquiring Alpha Tech. I already have an insider agreement with their chief technical officer. We will become monopolists in the market by September. No one will be able to stop us. James does not move. He holds the pause. The silence pressures Oliver, forcing him to fill it with new details to avoid discomfort. And we have already budgeted for aggressive marketing. Oliver gives away the cost structure without even noticing how James nodded slightly to his assistant in the corner. James finally speaks. Monopoly is a risk, Oliver, and insider games are a fragile foundation. Internally, James is already making a call to Alpha Tech's competitors. Oliver has just sold his victory for 5 minutes of dubious admiration. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Oliver committed strategic suicide by destroying the uncertainty factor. Liquidation of the fog of war. In applied strategy, your strength lies in what the enemy does not know. By boasting of plans, you give the opponent time for countermeasures. You turn your surprise into an expected attack. Impulsive transmission. Boasting is a form of cognitive incontinence. Oliver's brain could not withstand the tension of possessing a secret. A secret is potential energy. Boasting turns it into kinetic energy that dissipates in vain. The preemptive completion effect. The brain often confuses telling about a plan with executing a plan. Oliver already feels like a winner, because of which his real vigilance in negotiations with Alpha Tech will drop. 3. The psychological precedent. Phase. Let us turn to the Zeigarnik effect. Our brain holds tension regarding unfinished tasks. However, research by Professor Peter Gallwitzer, NYU, showed if a person publicly declares their intentions or successes that are not yet final, their motivation for real action drops. Society, confirming your greatness in response to boasting, gives you a surrogate of success. Your neurochemistry says, "We have already won, we can relax." Meanwhile, real predators like James use your relaxation to cut your hamstrings. 4. The counterstrike phase. Your reality must be impenetrable. Lesson number 4. The principle of radical pragmatism. Keep your victories in a black box. People should see the result, but they should never understand the mechanics of its achievement or your next steps. If you are asked about successes, answer with general phrases. We are working in normal mode. There are certain difficulties. This creates an information vacuum around you. Vacuum scares. Vacuum makes others guess. While they are guessing, you act. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The air in the club seems heavy with dust and history. Oliver feels his energy leaving behind the aftertaste of a cheap triumph. James looks through him as if Oliver is transparent glass. In this silence, only the steady ticking of the grandfather clock is heard, counting down the time until the collapse of the empire that Oliver so recklessly put in the display window. We have approached the darkest part of human nature, the chemistry of hatred that disguises itself as politeness. When you boast, you are not just sharing joy, you are committing an act of microaggression against someone else's status, and the biology of the witnesses of your triumph will reciprocate. Chapter 5. Biology of Envy. The Quote _74 Rule 1. The quote _75 Phase A. Bright, sterile office of an IT company in Austin. Ryan, a lead developer, has just parked his new matte black Porsche right in front of the cafeteria windows. He enters, casually throwing the keys on the table in front of his colleagues, David and Sarah. Quote 76, Ryan says, wiping his hands with antiseptic. He does this slowly, drawing attention to his expensive watch. Quote 77. David freezes with a cup of coffee in his hands. His face remains motionless, but a vein begins to pulse on his temple. Quote 78, David says. In his head at this moment, quote 79, Sarah smiles, but her gaze is fixed on the keys on the table as if it were a venomous spider. Quote 80, she jokes. This is a passive-aggressive jab, an attempt to lower the value of his purchase. A week later, when a critical error is found in Ryan's code, David and Sarah will quote 81 to inform him until the very release. 2. The quote 82 phase. Ryan activated a system of downward social comparison in his colleagues' brains, which causes physical pain. The neurochemistry of pain. Studies show that when a person sees the success of another in an area significant to them, the anterior cingulate cortex is activated. the same zone responsible for physical pain. Ryan's boasting literally hit David in the gut. Mirror neurons. Colleagues do not empathize with his success. On the contrary, their mirror neurons model the situation of possessing the resource, but immediately clash with reality. He has it, I do not. This gives birth to frustration. Displaced aggression. Ryan turned his colleagues into opponents. Envy is an evolutionary mechanism that forces an individual either to rise higher or, which is easier and more common, to drag the dominant down. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Recall the experiment with capuchin monkeys, Sarah Brosnan and Franz de Waal. 2 monkeys were given the same tasks. When both received cucumbers as a reward, everything was calm. But as soon as one began to be given sweet grapes and the second still received the cucumber, the deprived monkey began to fly into a rage, throw food at the experimenter, and refuse to cooperate. Boasting is when you demonstratively eat grapes in front of those who are paid in cucumbers. You can be a genius 3 times over, but biology will force the pack to sabotage your work simply to restore a sense of justice. 4. The counter-strike phase. Your task is not to cause pain to those you need. Lesson number 5. The principle of shared luck. If you must report your success, for example, to partners, always attribute part of the credit to circumstances, luck, or, what is even smarter, the help of those around you. I just got lucky with the timing. Without your support last year, I would not have managed. This reduces aggression and makes your success safe for someone else's ego. You are not, quote, 92. You are just, quote, 93.5. The, quote, 94 phase. It becomes quiet in the cafeteria. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant noise of the road are heard. Ryan drinks his espresso, feeling like a winner, not noticing how the shadow from his Porsche falling into the window cuts the table in half like a black line, behind which he remained completely alone. His colleagues are already exchanging glances in which there is not a grain of loyalty. We approach the ideological core of your weakness. Boasting is not an excess of strength. It is a cry for its lack. He who truly possesses power does not need confirmation of it through someone else's eyes. Boasting is an attempt to convince oneself of one's own significance using others as a cheap mirror. Chapter 6. Will to Power and Emptiness. The Internal Sun, Rule 1. The Clash Phase. A closed cigar club in Zurich. Thick smoke hangs under the ceiling in motionless layers. Thomas, the heir to a large industrial fortune, sits in a leather armchair opposite Marcus, a man whose name rarely appears in headlines, but whose decisions change currency rates. Thomas is excited. He has just acquired a rare asset, a network of lithium mines. Marcus, you must see this. Thomas lays out a folder with documents and photographs on the table. His hands make unnecessary movements. He is looking for approval in the eyes of the elder. I outplayed them all. Now I control the supplies for half of the European auto industry. My name will now be in the same row as the Titans. Tell me, this is the level of the grand game, right? Marcus slowly releases a cloud of smoke. His face is a mask of old parchment. He does not even look at the folder. Thomas. His voice sounds low and steady, causing an involuntary tremor in his interlocutor. Marcus uses the information vacuum as a shield. He who shouts about his victory is not yet accustomed to it. You celebrate as if it were an accident that surprised you. True power is quiet. It is so natural that it is not spoken of, just as gravity is not spoken of. Thomas feels his triumph shrinking to the size of a childish prank. He wanted to feel like a lion, but before the calmness of Marcus, he felt like a puppy that brought its master a fetch. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. Marcus dissected Thomas through the prism of radical pragmatism. Slave psychology versus master psychology. According to Nietzsche, the slave looks for value outside himself, in recognition, in the envy of others. His good and success exist only when confirmed by the crowd. The master himself is the source of value. Energy leak. All the mental energy Thomas spent on preparing the presentation of his success could have been directed toward strengthening his positions. He squandered the will to power on a cheap decoration. Cognitive vulnerability. Marcus realized that Thomas is psychologically dependent. Now it is enough for Marcus to simply frown or give a meager nod to manipulate Thomas. The latter will crawl out of his skin to regain the favor of the authority. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch and his will to power. Nietzsche argued that the highest form of man does not compare himself with others. Boasting is a product of ressentiment, hidden malice, and dependence. When you boast, you subconsciously admit, "I was not sure I was cool until I saw it in your eyes." Clinical psychology calls this fragile narcissism. As soon as the audience disappears or stops applauding, such a person internally collapses. 4. The counterstrike phase. Your achievements should nourish your internal structure, not your social facade. Lesson number 6. The rule of internal validation. Become your own Supreme Court. If you have achieved success, record it silently. Feel its weight inside you. True power is when you enter a room and people feel your strength, even though you have not uttered a single word about your achievements. Silence is the highest form of intimidating competitors. They do not know your resources, which means they overestimate them. 5. The sensory immersion phase. Silence falls in the club. Thomas hears his cigar smoldering, a faint crackle similar to the destruction of his illusions. Marcus looks through him, into the dark corner of the room where the shadows seem denser. The air here does not just smell of tobacco. It feels like thick lead pressing on the chest. Thomas closes the folder. His great achievement now seems to him a heavy and unnecessary burden in the presence of a man who owns the world without calling it his own. We have reached the finale. Now that your illusions regarding social recognition are destroyed, it is time to gather the shards into a blade. Boasting is entropy, a chaotic release of energy. Control is the ability to hold this nuclear reactor inside a lead shell of silence. Chapter 7. Total Control. The Black Sun Rule. 1. The Clash Phase Shanghai. A private art auction. High ceilings, cold marble, silence that can be cut with a knife. William, a young crypto millionaire, stands by a lot, a rare Ming Dynasty bowl. Next to him is Mr. Lin, a man whose age is difficult to judge. His face resembles the calm surface of a dark lake. William cannot contain his excitement. He has just outbid a competitor, raising the price to absurd heights. "It is a matter of dominance, Mr. Lin," William says, adjusting his tie. His gestures are sharp. He constantly looks around, checking if other participants are looking at him. "I can afford to buy this entire auction. People must know who sets the rules of the game here. Money without demonstration is just numbers in a cloud." Mr. Lin barely noticeably turns his head. "You bought a thing for $5 million to prove that you have $5 million," he says in a quiet, almost rustling voice. In his intonation, there is no condemnation, only a cold statement of fact. Now everyone knows your limit. You have become measurable, and that which can be measured can be swallowed. You spent the resource on noise. I spent that time buying up shares of the company that insures this auction. Now you own the bowl, and I own your risks. William freezes. His loud victory turned out to be a cage, the bars of which Mr. Lin forged from his very boasting. 2. The psychological X-ray phase. This is the culmination of radical pragmatism. Lin applied the invisible presence strategy. Cognitive asymmetry. William laid out all his cards. His motivation, dominance through status, his budget, and his emotional triggers became transparent. Lin remained in an information vacuum. Backflash effect. Boasting created an aura of an easy target around William. In social engineering, the one who demonstrates excess is always attacked first because his behavior is predictable. The neurochemistry of silence. While William's brain is bathing in dopamine from an imaginary triumph, Lin's brain is in a state of cold calculation, activation of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Lin does not spend glucose on emotions. He spends it on the architecture of seizure. 3. The psychological precedent phase. Let us turn to the overjustification effect. When an external reward, praise, envy, status, becomes the main goal of an activity, the internal motivation and quality of strategy degrade. The boaster stops working for the result. He starts working for the image of the result. In ethology, there is the concept of the handicap principle. Amos Zahavi proved that a peacock carries a heavy tail to show, I am so strong that I survive even with this burden. No, in human society, this tail of boasting only makes you slow. A real predator cuts off the tail to be faster. 4. The counter-strike phase. Your final transformation is complete. Lesson number 7. The rule of absolute shadow. Your true strength should manifest only at the moment of its application. All other times, you must be indistinguishable to radar. Success is a tool, not a decoration. Use your resources to create new levers of pressure, not to buy applause. He who is silent about his millions owns billions. He who is silent about his power possesses it absolutely. 5. The sensory immersion phase. The main light goes out in the auction hall. Only narrow beams of spotlights remain, directed at the ancient ceramics. William looks at his bowl, and it seems to him a heavy tombstone over his anonymity. Mr. Lin dissolves into the darkness of the corridor without leaving even the sound of footsteps. In this cold and emptiness, you finally understand. The world belongs not to those who shout, but to those who listen to this shout, choosing the place for the decisive blow. Conclusion. Your need for a beautiful finale is the last convulsion of your ego, thirsting for aesthetic approval. But I will give it to you to seal these lessons in your mind like a brand on red-hot iron. Silence as the highest form of power. The social world is not a masquerade ball where the owner of the brightest mask wins. It is a dark forest where every rustle gives away a position. Boasting is a signal rocket fired by you into the zenith. It momentarily illuminates your face, blinds you yourself, and gives coordinates to all snipers in a kilometer radius. When you close your mouth and extinguish within yourself the desire to seem, a metamorphosis occurs. Your internal space stops leaking through words. It densifies. You become a black hole, an object with infinite gravity that radiates nothing but attracts all possibilities, all resources, and all the weaknesses of others. A true predator does not growl before the leap. A true king does not adjust his crown every 5 minutes to check if it is in place. True power is the absence of the need to prove anything. Remember, as long as you speak of your triumph, you are living it in the past. As long as you are silent, You are creating it in the future. Step out of the spotlight. There is much more room for maneuver in the shadow. Your silence will become your loudest statement. Your invisibility will become your most reliable armor. The world belongs not to those who crave recognition, but to those who have learned to do without it. Knowledge of the mechanisms of the psyche is your main freedom. Subscribe to explore the hidden facets of human behavior together. And be sure to write in the comments which psychological pattern or strategy we will analyze next time. Let us seek the truth together.